Good evening. Thank you for joining us for Heirs Property, Clearing Title on Your Inherited Homestead. My name is Anitra Henning, and I work for the City of San Antonio in the Office of Historic Preservation on the Vacant Building Program. I'm so delighted to bring this presentation to you this evening. As we are talking about home ownership today, I want to acknowledge that we are gathered on the land of ancestors collectively called the Coahuiltecans, and hundreds of other groups of First Peoples in an area now known as San Antonio, Texas. We honor this land and express gratitude to the generations of descendants of the area's earliest peoples who have stewarded this place. As you watch our conversation today, please share your questions using the Q&A function throughout. And when using the Q&A function, please select all panelists from the drop-down so that we may collect your questions to share. We will address as many of them as we can during the live Q&A session in the last 20 minutes of our time together. We have wonderful panelists for you today, and to introduce them is Kathy Rodriguez, Deputy Historic Preservation Officer for the City of San Antonio. Welcome everyone, and please enjoy the conversation.
My name is Kathy Rodriguez. I'm the Deputy Historic Preservation Officer for the City of San Antonio's Office of Historic Preservation. I oversee the Vacant Building Program, the Living Heritage Program, and the Living Heritage Trades Academy for OHP. Tonight, we'll hear from Roger Enriquez, Associate Professor and Director of UTSA's Policy Studies Center.
You need folks to have these intergenerational wealth transfers to happen in order to keep the social cultural fabric of the community intact.
Crystal Requejo, COO of Programs and Development for the Mexican American Unity Council.
So it's just telling your neighbors, telling your friends, and educating them on the importance of creating that plan, of having that estate planning process in place.
Kat Doucette, attorney with the San Antonio Legal Services Association.
It doesn't have to be sad. It's a tool. If you have a toolbox, you need to have your hammer and your wrench and your screwdriver and all of those things together so that if you have a problem, you can reach in there and grab it and solve whatever the problem is.
So the Vacant Building Program in the program areas, which is about 112 square miles of the city of San Antonio. The objective is to identify vacant structures, engage with the property owners, and to help them find a solution to that vacancy. Essentially, the program ordinance itself also allows the staff some flexibility to work with property owners. There is language in the ordinance that allows for extensions of time for registration as well as fee waivers for those owners that are eligible. There are enforcement actions part of the ordinance. So if we have a property owner who is not willing to come into compliance, which compliance would be to register a vacant structure and to maintain a minimum standard of care. If a property owner is not willing to do that, then there are enforcement actions written into the ordinance that is part of a notification process. Violations can be issued, and if compliance is not achieved by the owner, then we can take them to municipal court. That's not our objective, is to have a long list of registered properties or to take property owners to court. Our objective is to engage and work with property owners, as I mentioned, to find a long-term solution. So the Vacant Building Program, by nature, is going to be working with property owners to find long-term solutions to vacancy. And one of the things that we have encountered is that a large number of properties that we engage with through the program are not clear of title, so that a potential solution could be found, for example, selling of the property. And so the heirs property topic is very important to the program and to neighborhoods because there are a large number of the single family structures in our inventory that are in limbo due to not having clear titles and being held up because oftentimes older homes get handed down to the descendants, but without clear legal instruments in place. And if the descendants or the siblings can't all agree on what to do with the property, then they remain in limbo. And in some cases, it could be decades. And meanwhile, the structures fall into further disrepair, and in some cases end up subject to the Building Standards Board's process, which could end up in an order for demolition. If you want to learn more about the vacant building program, you can actually visit our YouTube channel, which is Essay Preservation, where you will find videos in English and in Spanish.
So my name is Crystal Requejo. I am the Chief Operating Officer of Programs and Development here at the Mexican American Unity Council, MAC for short. We're located in the west side of San Antonio. We focus in 3 areas. We have education, affordable housing, and economic opportunity. So that's where our housing program would fall into our estate planning program that we run here at MAC. So education is anything from working with youth and college readiness to parenting programs to educating our community in different ways, such as health programs with the Promotora de Salud model, assisting with social services, to our affordable housing properties. So MAC owns 3 affordable housing properties. 2 are senior, Palacio de Sol, and then we also have our multifamily property, which is the Stonehouse Apartments on the northwest side of San Antonio. I'm from the west side of San Antonio, so I graduated from Memorial High School. So I'm from the neighborhood, and so for me, it was something that I always knew I wanted to come back and find a way to give back to my community. So I've been with MAC for about 15 years, and so for me, it's been an honor to grow with the organization. And I love the fact that I'm able to help youth. I'm able to help, seniors and just all over the spectrum of ages, because I feel like it really gives back, and you're able to build the community that you come from. And that for me is super important.
My name is Kat McCauley Doucette, and I am the staff attorney with the San Antonio Legal Services Association. And we are a local nonprofit that provides free legal services to San Antonio's indigent and at-risk population. Well, before I joined SALSA, I was a solo practitioner, and I worked in real estate and title, and I loved it. When I moved to Southtown, my husband and I moved to Southtown, something that I immediately noticed among my neighbors is that there were houses where multiple generations had lived in the home, and the people who are living in it now were not the record title holder of the house. Maybe the grandma who had passed away is the original title holder, and there were issues along the way with, well, who owns the property? Is it the son? Is it the daughter? Is it the grandchild? We don't know. And it would vary depending on that particular family's circumstances, whether grandma had a will or didn't have a will or some other type of legal document to help properly transfer title to her children. But in many cases, and I think this is generally so, most people, unfortunately, don't have a will or an estate plan or something in place to protect and serve their children. And as I'm living in this neighborhood and kind of seeing what's going on, it broke my heart, because it really did a disservice to their children. Perhaps there was an estranged family member, which happens sometimes, and they couldn't quite get on the same page to figure out, all right, who's the title holder here? Who's the one who's going to pay the taxes? Maybe the house needed to be updated or the plumbing needed to be fixed. And if they didn't know legally who the proper title holder was, they couldn't go get a loan to fix the plumbing in their house. And, things just kind of spiral that way, and it becomes a bigger problem long term. So, sorry, this is a very long answer, but that's kind of how I got involved in this area. And now I'm working with Salsa, and we're working toward helping communities resolve this problem.
My name's Roger Enriquez. I'm an associate professor in the College for Health Community Policy at the University of Texas at San Antonio. I'm also the director of the Policy Studies Center and the executive director of the Westside Community Partnerships. We had the very good fortune of meeting with a councilwoman at the time who came onto campus. We actually had a very good discussion about home ownership, and in particular home ownership as it relates to her council district. And part of the discussion was this idea that sometimes folks live in a home, but they don't have legal title to the home. And we started, I mentioned to her that basically when I first arrived at UTSA 20 years ago almost, we were asked pretty much the same question. The question was, why do we have so many vacant lots in my council district? And we said, well, we're not 100% sure, but we can look into it. And so I can't remember the exact number of the inventory, but we took sort of a random sample of these vacant title abstract. And the interesting thing that we found is the vast majority of them had fractionalized ownership at some point, right? In other words, someone died without a will, and they didn't, and that ownership of the property was fractionalized. In other words, the family members each had a share. So we had this discussion. She goes, well, what do we do about it? I said, well, back then the policy recommendation that we made was that make sure that people in your council district die with a will, right? Interestingly, around the same time, the state of Texas had adopted what we now know as the transfer on death deed. And that's how we got involved. And we were able to create a pilot program working with one of the most iconic nonprofits on the West Side, the Mexican American Unity Council.
Please know that this is not meant to be construed as legal advice for any particular person watching this video. You should really seek guidance from your own attorney, because every fact case is going to be different. This is just kind of meant to be some general information about what these things are and what some options may be for you, the viewer of this video. That's a great question. Estate plans are not just for rich people. Every person, especially if you own real estate, should have an estate plan. And what an estate plan is varies depending on you and your personal needs. Many people will have a will, which I think most of us know what that is. It's a document that says when you pass away, who your property goes to, and who's going to manage the distribution of that property. And when you die, your family takes that document to a lawyer and they file those documents with the court, and then the property can be distributed according to what you want and your wishes. The beauty of having these estate planning documents, again, is that you get to choose, you get to designate who your assets go to. And in the context of this conversation, really your real property, your home that you live in, you can decide who gets it. And that helps preserve generational wealth. So I think, the thing that we look at when we see I guess the question was rich people, right? They preserve generational wealth, meaning their kids keep money in the family because they know who gets the house. They know who has access to the bank accounts, things like that. Whereas if there's no will, if there's no estate plan, it then becomes a big question mark, and it doesn't necessarily go in the order that the family thinks it ought to because of the laws of the state of Texas. So definitely it's good to talk with an attorney, talk about your estate plan, talk about what options are best for you and what you want and for your family.
And we know a lot about, there's been a lot of work done on home ownership and having a home, and having a home paid for really gives you an important financial leg up in life. And so, this is one of the reasons that we push very hard in that particular community for having these transfer on death deeds in place, so that folks can create this opportunity for an intergenerational wealth transfer. I know that something that's very important to OHP is the idea of these abandoned structures and demolitions and things, these very high rates in these pockets in these communities. And my sense of it is that much of that is attributable to a lack of estate planning, either a generation or two before. In other words, if the house is left to everyone, let's say it's 5, 6, 10 kids, it's really left to no one. It's just a very damaging thing to the community, because the loss of a family home means that that's a family that's no longer in the community. And, it's important to try to retain the social cultural fabric of the community, but you need original residents to stay in the community, because that's where the knowledge, the institutional and the communal knowledge lies, right? And so I just, I think all these things are very interrelated, right? And you need folks to have these intergenerational wealth transfers to happen in order to keep the social cultural fabric of the community intact. And it seems to me that the transfer on death deed and some sort of minimal estate planning are really an integral part of the solution.
Our housing program actually started 3 years ago. We kicked off in 2018, and we kicked it off with a housing fair. And really, the goal of that housing fair was to figure out what the needs were in the community. And so we found out, and it was loud and clear, that the biggest issue that was brought to the table was estate planning. So clearing title. Just when we say estate planning, so much can fall into that, but pretty much clearing title for properties. And so that's kind of where we fell into the estate planning program. And that's been our main focus over the last 3 years, of helping families clear title by doing affidavits of heirship or doing a transfer on death deed, and really just educating families on having a plan. We don't like to talk about it, especially in the Latino communities. We don't really like to talk about death and what happens, when somebody were to pass away. But it's just really bringing awareness to the community of having a plan.
Talking about death is really difficult, and for everyone. I don't want you to think that it's, I do this for a living. I do this every day. And even when my husband and I made our own estate plan, it was emotional. It's emotional to think about your own mortality. And it is a difficult conversation to bring up. But what I like to tell people is it doesn't have to be sad. It's a tool. If you have a toolbox, you need to have your hammer and your wrench and your screwdriver and all of those things together, so that if you have a problem, you can reach in there and grab it and solve whatever the problem is. And an estate plan is the same thing. You want to have the right tools in your toolbox to make sure that your family is taken care of. And when you look at it that way, then suddenly it's not scary or it's not sad. It's a matter of protecting your family, protecting your children, protecting if you bought your house, protecting the thing that you worked so hard to save up the money for and purchase, and you want to pass that down to your children. Or if you inherited it from a family member, you want to make sure that it stays in the family. And if you look at it like that, it's a benefit to your children. It's not sad, it's not morbid, it's a tool. And I think perhaps that's the best way to look at it and approach the estate plan.
And what this particular tool does is it transfers this discrete piece of property if and only if you die. If you don't die, it doesn't have any effect, right? You can still borrow against the property. You can still sell the property. And in other words, all the rights that you enjoyed before you signed this document are still there. It's only if you die that then the transfer of the property would happen. The transfer on death deed sets up your beneficiaries, and in the event it contemplates, it has you contemplate, in the event that your beneficiary isn't available, what do you want to do? Right? Oh, okay, well then to Y. Great. We can definitely do Y, right? And so there's an A, a B, and a C. A part A is just saying, you know, in the event that this person's not here, do you want it to go to their heirs or do you want it to go to the alternate beneficiary? And if they have an alternate beneficiary, then of course it would go flow to them, right? And so you have them initial. So it's important to explain to folks what the transfer of death deed is and what it is not, right? It's not a will. It's not going to deal with, you know, property, your personal effects and jewelry and things of that nature, automobiles. Although curiously, the state of Texas also has a transfer on death deed for automobiles, right? And so it's a little bit, you know, it has a tendency to, you know, because folks are kind of comfortable with the concept of a will. You know, often what will end up happening is like, well, they want to put conditions, for example. Well, as long as he, you know, takes care of, I don't know, one of the brothers or sisters. It's like, no, once the transfer is complete, the transfer is complete. There, you know, this isn't the right tool for that.
As we talked about before, a TOD is a transfer on death deed. And just kind of a general overview of what the document is. It is a document that gets filed in the county clerk's deed records in the same location where the deed to your house gets filed. And it'll have who you are, who you're the transferor or the one giving the property, and it'll list who you want to have the property upon your death, and it'll list the legal description of your property, and then specific language about how that transfer will take place. And then it's signed in front of a notary like a normal deed, and then it gets filed. And again, you should absolutely speak with your own attorney about the specifics that are pertinent to you and how you want it to be transferred and who you want it to be transferred to and how this applies to you, because it is going to be a little different for a person. But it's a really great tool to have to not have this particular asset be part of your estate if or when you pass away. It's separate from what would go to probate if there is a probate of your estate. And so it's a great tool if if it is just the house, if it's just the house in terms of your assets, this is a great tool. And it's relatively simple, relatively straightforward, not super expensive to hire a lawyer to draft for you. And it really can save your family from future arguments. You know, maybe you just want to leave your property to one. If you have 3 kids, maybe you just want to leave it to one kid. Well, guess what? You own the property, you get to say what happens to it. And they can't argue about it. I mean, they can argue about it, but it's not going to do much good. You know, this is a legally binding document, which is really kind of nice. It preserves headache for your family members later on because it states specifically how you want it to be, which is really nice.
We determine our heirs at time of death, not at the time we contemplate our death. Anything can happen. That's the whole point, right? The whole point behind it is that we don't get to determine the day upon which is our last one here on earth, right? So anything can happen. I mean, unfortunately, let's say you both die at the same time, God, forbid, right? Or something along those lines, or he predeceased you. Well, then where are we at? That's the great thing about the transfer on death deed is that there's, a beneficiary, alternative beneficiary, etc. Kind of set up in such a way that it sort of gets to these types of questions, right? Is it perfect? No, because nothing's really perfect. But it's very good. It's a very good tool. It's very easy. It's accessible to most folks. I do think that they need the help of an attorney to complete it in some instances because some circumstances are a little bit unusual. But that's the whole point, right? Again, if we knew what the composition of our families would be, how things would be, then yeah, you're right. You wouldn't probably need all that. But unfortunately, life does not necessarily follow the script. And in the event that should happen, it's nice to know that you've contemplated some of these things and you have backup plans, etc.
If a family member passes away and they have a TOD, a transfer on death deed, that you were the recipient, you have to file an affidavit in the county clerk's records about the death and about you being the recipient. And the best recommendation I have is to work with an attorney. If you need to work with a title company to get everything squared away, make sure title is properly transferred to you. That's probably the best recommendation. Just to make sure that no steps are missed there. And it's not something I would necessarily recommend doing on your own. You definitely want to have your lawyer's eyes on it to make sure that no steps are missed in that process. In the event that your family member who owned the house has already passed away, there are a couple of different avenues that you can go depending on what your fact scenario is. And again, you'd want to talk with your attorney about this. But if, let's say, we're going to say that it's grandma's house and grandma passed away and grandma had a will. Awesome. We know who this property is going to. You contact your attorney. They take the will to probate court. And then the property is distributed by virtue of an executor's deed to whoever the will says gets the property. In many cases, that's not what happens. And so if there's no will, then you'd have to look at your family tree, and everybody's family tree is a little bit different depending on, if grandma was married, if grandma had children only of her marriage, or if there was a child from outside the marriage. There are all these, it's very fact intensive. There are all these different scenarios that can happen. And depending on that, there are some different options depending on, yeah, there are different options. So one option is to have your attorney file a intestate, meaning without a will, probate with the probate court. And you would, in those documents, have affidavits of heirship, and affidavits of heirship are basically a list of your family tree, who the heirs are, heirs meaning people who survived, grandma who passed away, and it lists out the family tree, who lives where, dates of birth, and it shows who now has an interest in grandma's property. That's one option. And that's usually best to go that route if there's more than just the house. Maybe there are bank accounts, maybe there are other accounts, there's a car, there's some, other assets than just the house. So that's one of several options. Another option is just to file affidavits of heirship, which we talked about in the probate context. You can file affidavits of heirship with the county clerk where the property is located. And again, those affidavits of heirship list who the family members are, the heirs, who survived grandma, and who rightfully has an interest in this property. And it's a little hit or miss if, depending on what you intend to do with the property. Maybe you want to sell the property. Maybe you want to get a loan on the property if the property is in disrepair or needs the plumbing fixed. Again, for an example, you need to get a loan. Well, we need to figure out who has an interest in that property. And another option, just off the top of my head, would be filing a muniment of title in the with the probate court, which would transfer the property to whoever the heirs are. The best case scenario, and this doesn't happen with every family, the best case scenario is once the family members who are the heirs are determined by virtue of this document, which is signed in front of a notary and filed in the property records, is if all the family members can come together and make an agreement that one person is going to take title to this house, and a deed can be drafted by your attorney to put title in that one person with the sign off of all the other heirs. The beauty of this situation is that then you know who that one person is. You know that that one person is responsible for payment of property taxes and nobody else is responsible at that point. And then if that one person wants to get a loan to fix up the house, get a new roof, get new plumbing, whatever, they can do that, and they have clear title, meaning nobody else has an interest in it or is going to come and say, oh, this is my house too.
It's an ongoing program. So we have rolling orientations done every week. We changed it a bit because of COVID-19. So all of our orientations are done either through Zoom or they're done over the phone with clients. So they have an initial orientation to find out what the program is, what it consists of. Is it something that we can help you with? And then the second appointment would be you come into our offices and you meet with our attorneys through Zoom. And we set up the meeting here, and then they figure out what it is that you need, and then from there they'll continue with working with you, our staff here at Mock. So anyone in the city of San Antonio can qualify for our program. It is completely free of charge. So we have partners. We partner with UTSA, and we also partner with just attorneys that give their time pro bono to assist us. And so our staff are notaries, and so they'll help kind of with notarizing the process. And then once they meet with the attorney, they figure out what the need is. Do they need an affidavit of heirship? It is something that we can do. And if it is possible, there's no fee. They're given the paperwork and it's up to them to go and file it at the court, their county court. So we don't go outside of the city of San Antonio because everything kind of can change depending on where you're at. So we strictly stick to the city, but we are not limiting off of income. We will tell you once we meet with the attorney if it's something that we can do. If we feel that it's something that might require more work or something out of what we're able to assist you with, we'll give you a referral to another agency. But we'll be upfront with the client as they come in and talk about what their situations are. So usually what we do is if they come in to clear title and they want they're coming in for the clearing of title, they do an affidavit of heirship. When they're done, then we walk them through the process to create the TOD, to the transfer on death deed, so that they already know that moving forward, they don't have to leave someone else in that position of having to clear title. For 2020 alone, we were able to preserve about $12 million in assets for the community. So that's just helping families being able to clear title and say that they are the owner of their homes. It's huge because we know that families sometimes have just passed it on from generation to generation. And so now we can preserve that property and make sure that they're able to continue passing it on the right way to the future generations. Surprisingly, we did better. Our numbers were higher than we were previously for 2018 and 2019. And I think, well, first, MOC never closed its doors. We remained open, just kind of did social distancing, did things by appointment, moved over to using Zoom, working with clients over the phone and meeting them where they were, but in socially distant way. So that really helped us. But I think that really the word of mouth helped, and people having to start thinking the reality of they had to have a plan. I think COVID brought a lot of realities to people that we never really wanted to talk about them. It wasn't something that might be part of our culture. And it might just be a conversation that we don't want to have. It's a very uncomfortable conversation, but I think that COVID did bring to light that issue. And I think it made people start to plan and think about what should I do if I was in this situation. So I think that also kind of brought more people out to seek our services as well. Call our offices 210-978-0500. You can ask for Aisha Sanchez. She is our housing coordinator, and she will be assisting you by setting you up with orientation and then giving you kind of the next steps to be able to complete your process. If it's being an affidavit of heirship, creating a TOD, a transfer on death deed, or a gift deed. And sometimes you might not know exactly what you need, but she's there to walk you through the process. So don't be afraid, don't feel intimidated. We're here to help you and kind of explain things as you go.
You don't want to wait on tackling these issues. The sooner you can approach it, the better. I've seen some situations where I had to track down, 18 different people to get them to sign off on a deed. And I'm still working on it. Actually, it's been years in the making to locate these people, explain to them what's going on, and then work with them to resolve the issue. It gets messy. So the sooner you deal with it, the better. And I understand not everybody's going to get along. Not everybody, there may be estranged family members. I think we talked about that before, and it's tough, but the taxes still need to be paid. The property still needs to be maintained. Don't wait. If there's a problem, don't wait. It's not going to go away. It's only going to get worse. Seek counsel from your attorney. Figure out a plan that's best for you and for your kids, or for, if you want to help your grandma get a will, talk to an attorney, help them get you on track so that it's not a problem down the line, because it's not going to get better. It's only going to get worse. So get those tools in your toolbox, get them ready so that you help your family long term.
We can get ahead of this thing a little bit right now. We can make investments in these communities, because that's Remember, the economic displacement happened 40, 50 years ago and continues even today. Well, we can reverse that trend, and then we can reverse the other trends of people moving out of the community by making sure they have good, clean title to their family homes, and you leave the home and not the headache. Yeah, I think that it's so important to understand that this is just part of the equation. We need to make certain that folks are aware of the issue, that they avoid it, and if they find themselves in it, find a mechanism for them to mitigate that, right? To unite title once again in a property. Because again, these are original residents, and we want to try to, have that continuity.
Being able to educate other people. So if you, and having a plan in place of saying, you know what, let's not wait until we get there and let's create a transfer on death deed. Let's have a plan. Let's do the estate planning process. It's very important because sometimes we don't know, what could happen, and not having that plan can really affect someone else. And so it's just telling your neighbors, telling your friends, and educating them on the importance of creating that plan, of having that estate planning process in place, and then knowing that we're here. We're here if you have any questions. If I didn't answer something and you still have a question, or again, don't be intimidated. There's no silly questions. I think that sometimes we're all in the same boat. I have family who had to deal with the same process, and there's a lot of things that you don't know. And so it's okay. You just have to come in, we'll work with you, we'll walk you through the process. And we're here to help you understand, and kind of just help you and guide you to be able to figure out what the best plan is for you.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the present. We're all wearing different things now, but it's good. Um, so I want to, we only have a little bit of time, and we had quite a few questions come in. So I want to kind of jump right in. Crystal, I think our first question is for you. Why, I mean, Mock does a lot of great things in the community and helps a lot of people. Like, why was the housing program so important to your mission?
The goal of our starting the housing program was to really find what the need was of the community. And I think that's why we started with the housing fair. And that's when we found out is clearing title was one of the biggest issues our community was facing. So we didn't want to just start something and just say, this is what they need. We actually wanted to hear what the community needed. And I think that's why it's become such an important topic to Mock, is because we're helping the community in an area that they're looking for, an area that they need assistance with.
That's great. So Kat, we talked a lot about Todd's. So another question about Todd's. So they transfer on death deed allows a property owner to actually, or allows a property to be transferred outside of probate court. Why is that a benefit for people?
Thanks, Anitra. Passing title outside of probate court is really nice for a couple of reasons. The first one being it's significantly less expensive than going through probate court. The getting with your attorney to draft this document, and the filing fees are much, much less. One of the other benefits of, excuse me, one of the other benefits of using this document is that after the title holder passes away, if that title holder received Medicaid during their life and actually had to use it and medical bills accrued, Medicaid can't come in or and make an estate recovery claim against that property, which is really nice. That's something that we see frequently when we do a probate of a will. The Medicaid estate recovery program will come in and say, you owe us, I don't know, I've seen it in practice anywhere from $3,000 to $100,000, depending on the illness of the person. It can vary greatly. So that's a great way to protect that home and that asset. That's not to say that you shouldn't just do a TOD and not do a will. I mean, having a will is also a great backup. You should have all those tools, and I know we keep talking about that toolbox, but having all of those tools in there is really, really helpful. And so the will can serve as the backup for any other assets that the deceased person would have.
Yeah, that's, that toolbox is very important. I think most of us, I would say, would have more than just a house to transfer to a relative. So getting the other items that you own taken care of is important too. Because I'm going to quote Roger here, and because you want to leave them the home and not the headache, right? Like it's very important. So Roger, I know that you've done a lot of research on the West Side, and you specifically looked at property owners who had inherited property. What did you find when you studied those people?
I think that one of the things that folks that really just popped out to me is when we were looking at the zip code 78207, we noticed that the folks who make over $50,000, which is 2 or 3 times more than the median income in '07, a lot of them did not have a mortgage. In other words, if you look at the data, they have no debt service on their home. And so, and digging a little bit deeper into that, we realized that many of them had inherited the home. And so they started really with a leg up. And I know that many of us in 78207 and those communities, those of us who live and work here, definitely want to obviously raise the median income in the community. And leaving the home is a great leg up on that. There's a lot of data, national data, local data, on the lack of intergenerational wealth transfers in Latino communities. And on occasion, that can be, the lack of intergenerational wealth transfer can be traced back to the lack of estate planning. So whenever folks can take advantage of the opportunity and leave some estate planning tools, use those to leave something for folks to start with, maybe open a small business, send their kids to college, or give down payments to kids so that they can buy their own home. I think that that is a very valuable thing that they can do for their family.
Absolutely. So my colleague, Diane Sossenhagen, is here with us, and she's been perusing the chat with all of the questions that have been coming through, and she's going to throw a couple of them at you right now.
Yes, there's so many great questions, so I'm going to try to do the best I can and get as many as we can. But we'll start with one, and I think this one, I'm going to ask Kat to answer this. Is it true that you can't sell the property if you acquired property via a TOD or some type of delay of 2 years?
I can't remember what the statute is on that, but I think, and Roger, correct me if I'm wrong here. I mean, I think if you file the affidavit of death, you're good. Now, it would depend on your title company too. I know some title companies are very, right, bingo, right? Some title companies are very picky about what they will insure because a title company is an insurance company. And so while they, of course, follow the law, and all of us attorneys will draft something in accordance with the law, the title company may have rules and regulations of their own that are more strict than what the law says. So sometimes I tell my clients, go ahead and shop title companies, figure out which one is going to let you do what you need to do. And they do that. And where title company may not have allowed them to close that transaction there, another title company will.
Yeah, understandably, some underwriters are a little more conservative than others. And because the TOD is, even though it's somewhat new, but it's not really new anymore. They may be a little bit skittish and want to wait the 2-year, for the statute of limitations to toll, or any, something along those lines, in order to sort of cure the title a little bit in the event that something could happen, right? So, I mean, that go to a different title company basically would be the answer to that, I think.
Hey, sounds good. Thanks for the great advice. I like how y'all worked together on that one. That was great. Okay, I think I found another good one. I think this is for you, Roger. So I'm gonna send this one your way. I've gone to pay property taxes for my mom on a property that is still in her my grandfather's name, but he's been deceased since 1982-83. How is it possible that a deceased person can be listed as the property owner for purposes of tax rules.
Yeah, I mean, we got to be very careful here, because the reality is that there may be exemptions still in place that that deceased person or the current homeowner is no longer entitled to. So I'm going to punt here a little bit and say that this is one that really requires individual attention directly from an attorney, because there's some issues here that they need to tread quite lightly here.
Sounds good.
So sorry about that. Yeah.
That sounds good. Thank you. Okay. And Crystal, I have a couple of questions for you. Can mock help if there's still a loan on the property? And can they also help if the property owner has already passed away?
Yeah, so it depends. It's case by case. So they really have to come in, and we'll sit down and we'll hear what their situation is. So it really just determined by the situation that each client is coming in. So it has to be. I can't answer it directly because it could be like a lot of backstory to it. And so that's when we're not attorneys, and so we'll hand it over to Roger, which is one of our attorneys that Mock works with. We hand it over to our pro bono attorney that works with us, Oscar, and so they're the ones that will kind of walk the clients through and kind of explain the situation. So we will give you some upfront information, orientation of what the process is, and then we hand it over to the attorney, and they're the ones who can kind of give you more detail. Because again, it could be so many different scenarios that we could be seeing.
Sounds great. Thank you. Okay, I see another question. I think this is maybe for Kat. Does the Todd work for any real estate, not just homestead, like investment real estate?
I don't see why
Sorry.
not.
Was that one for me?
I think maybe Kat or Roger.
Kat,
Does
okay.
the Todd work? I'm sorry. Does the Todd work for any real estate, or is it just a homestead, the homestead exemption, like an investment property real estate? Does that make?
Yeah,
It should work with any property. Now, you know, obviously for people who have very complicated, you know, they own multiple properties for whatever reason, you know, there are other state tools that they may want to avail themselves of. But in the, you know, if they're interested and they have a very, you know, specific plan as to what it is they want to do with, you know, a piece of property, yeah, there's no requirement that it be the estate. The only thing I can think of that would be a little bit different is property with mobile homes on it. Mobile homes are not necessarily considered, you know, a home. There's a whole process that you have to go through to attach it to the property and all that. I don't know if that's kind of what they were thinking about as well, but no, I mean, it's with real property. It's, you know, so if you own a home, you know, a vacation home or a rental property in a home. We've had folks who actually have like one house and then right next door, and we've done TODs for two different family members because often that's part of their plan, right? They want to leave X house to A child and Y house to B child, and yeah, absolutely, you can avail yourself of the TOD for that.
Sounds great. Okay, thank you. Let's see. I see another one here. Let's see. I've inherited my home. I have an affidavit of heirship. However, there's one person that never signed. I contacted them and they refused to talk to me. What can you advise? Is there any type of advice you can give this individual? Maybe Kat, Roger, or?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the things that we always share with folks. We can work through legal issues, but familial issues are outside our purview, right? Interestingly, I've consulted with the city of Dallas, and one of the things that they're doing is creating a mediation program in order to sort of take these specific kinds of issues and attempt to mediate them, right? Because we don't have that mechanism. You know, Mock and I and SureCat and others. I mean, that's very time consuming. Often these individuals don't even live in the same city or state. And it can be very problematic to try to chase down that last individual, right? But yeah, I mean, you know, there's the law requires that you have in order to have 100% clear title, if that's your goal, you've got to have that fractional ownership signed over to you. Yeah, and you know, but you know, in the meantime, I mean, I don't know what the outstanding share is. I mean, you can at least rest assured that, you know, for example, if you own 90% of it, you own 90% of it, right? I mean, that should give you some solace there.
And the other thing is, if you're a fractional owner in or an heir in a property and you're living there and you're trying to get your homestead exemption for your tax purposes, you don't have to be 100% owner to file a homestead exemption with the county, which is really nice. That's a recent change. And so there is a form you can fill out if you go to the county. I think it's in the county assessor's website that at least you can register for that homestead exemption. So you're limited to that 10% cap, which is nice.
So our webinar in April, that's on YouTube, you can search essay preservation. Our webinar in YouTube, we actually covered that with Professor Heather Way from UT, and she covered it in depth. So if someone is interested in learning more about like how to file a homestead exemption for a property that you are only a partial owner of, please check out that video because it was really great information. The other thing that I wanted to mention is, in talking about family members and trying to get someone to the table, we do have a free resource, at least here in Bexar County. It's called the Bexar County Dispute Resolution Center. And that is, obviously the other person still has to decide to come to the table, but if you're at loggerheads about how you want to move forward with the property and you can't figure it out, if everybody's willing, you can go and use that service through the Bexar County Dispute Resolution Center, and there's no charge for that. So that's, like Roger said, that's outside of the lawyering. It's the mediation, and so we do have that resource here in Bexar County. So I'm looking at the clock, and we're actually at 7 o'clock right now, so we'll go ahead and wrap up. So we've learned a lot of things this evening. We've learned that Roger is like the king of catchphrases because he has leave them the home, not the headache. He has, we need the intergenerational wealth transfers to protect the social cultural fabric of our community. I think there's a third one that's not coming to my mind. He was like the king of catchphrases. I know I cut one out when I was making the video. There were so many. It's a lot of really great information. We've learned from Kat, I think a really great perspective on how to look at this topic, because it is something that people don't want to talk about. People don't want to talk about death, but if you look at it as a tool, if you look at it as something that's just going to benefit you and your family going into the future, then it doesn't, it kind of changes it a little bit and makes it less kind of maudlin. And then we learned from Crystal about her amazing program at Mock that's helping so many people all throughout San Antonio. And we had put into the chat Mock's contact number again, and then it's going to be on our last slide that we'll have up here in a few seconds. And then we'll also send out a follow-up email that will include all of the great information that was shared here today. So I hope that through this hour that you've gained some new and useful knowledge to help you and your family. We know it's a difficult topic and there's a lot of things involved, but if we could, help you kind of focus on a good thing just a little bit, then maybe you'll get some benefit from it. So I thank you all very much for joining us. We do have a post-event survey that we'll ask you to fill out if you'd like to. There's a link and there's also a QR code if you use those, and that will also go out in the email as well. It's a short survey. I think it's like 5 questions, and then we ask a couple questions about you, but all of the questions on the survey are optional. We just want to understand if you joined us this evening. So I thank you all so much for joining us. I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. Have a good night.